So I just want to say welcome to everybody who is here, who's joining us live, and those of you who are joining us by watching the recording. Thanks for being here. I just want to acknowledge that this is BIPOC Mental Health Month, this month of July, and it is also the end of Black Maternal Mental Health Week. So we are holding this self-care webinar in honor of that. And it's just such an important topic. So I'm glad that we can have a webinar about it, talk about it, dig deeper. And I just know that self-care is such a huge part of the grieving and healing journey. And, you know, for me, a lot of it's setting boundaries, right? It's like taking care of myself, and it's not easy. It's not something that I grew up with. So I'm excited to learn more from Kima and Alishia, but I will first quickly introduce myself. My name's Kylie Yanish, and I'm the founder of Return to Zero Hope. And my son Norbert was stillborn back in 2005 at 35 weeks. So we just celebrated his 16th birthday a couple weeks ago. And from that came this nonprofit many years later. But I'm honored to be in this position with this platform, to be sharing information with others, families who are grieving, and empowering them on their own journeys, because it can be isolating, it can be confusing. So I'm glad that we can do that. I would like to introduce our two speakers for tonight. So Kima Toze found Return to Zero Hope through the Luminary program. And then she joined the Return to Zero Hope Board of Directors back in January of this year. And she's now board chair-elect and will be starting this coming January. She serves as co-facilitator for the Women of Color Support Group and also a moderator for the BIPOC Growth and Healing After Loss Facebook group. In 2017, Kima's son Jackson was stillborn at 28 weeks. And Jackson gave Kima the most wonderful gift imaginable by making her a mother. Her healing revolves around finding ways to keep Jackson's memory alive. Kima is a licensed clinical social worker within the military community. However, after losing Jackson, her life and work took a dramatic turn, and she began to transform her grief and pain into creating safe spaces for others to experience hope and healing. She holds a special place in her heart for pregnancy and infant loss families, and strives to spread awareness about the issues of maternal and infant mortality within communities of color. Kima lives in Washington State with her husband, Glenn. And then Alishia Anderson, she serves alongside Kima as co-facilitator of the Women of Color Support Group and also moderator of the BIPOC Growth and Healing After Loss Facebook group. And her firstborn son, DJ, was stillborn also at 28 weeks in 2016. Through her grief journey, she has grown spiritually, discovered her purpose, and has become a better wife, mother, pregnancy loss advocate, and mentor to other baby loss families who've unfortunately experienced the same tragic loss. Alishia learned early after her loss that sharing her story helped her heal. And 2 years into her healing journey, she self-published her book, Still Here, a memoir of love, loss, and triumph after stillbirth, to help eradicate what she coined as the 3 S's of baby loss: silence, secrecy, and shame. And Alishia resides in Southern California with her husband, Derek, and her 2 living sons. So join me in just welcoming them, and I'm going to hand it over to Kima and Alishia to talk about this important topic of self-care.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen. I want to welcome you all to our webinar, Self-Care After Pregnancy Loss. And like Kylie mentioned, I'm Kima Toze. And I'm just going to go ahead and advance my screen here. So this is just who we are. So I came across this quote by Megan Devine, and she's the author of It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And I think this quote really speaks to the misconceptions that we carry around about grieving a loss, especially when we're grieving the loss of a pregnancy or the death of a baby. We often think that grief is just an emotional experience, but this quote really highlights how it can be a full body and a full mind experience. We often think of grief as primarily emotional, but grief is a full body, full mind experience. So grief reactions after baby loss can feel really overwhelming because a lot is happening in the moments in the moments of the loss and the moments after the loss. It's a lot to undertake and try to make sense of. Grief is not just emotional, as I mentioned, it's a full experience of physical, cognitive experiences and behavioral experiences. So it's really all encompassing. These are just some examples of grief reactions that are commonly experienced after a baby loss. But remember that this list is not exhaustive, so not all of these examples will apply to everyone. But if you see here, some of these examples may seem, they're really common and you may have experienced them. So physical experiences may be a tightness in your chest, maybe you lack energy in your body, just feeling an overall sense of being run down. Maybe you have headaches or body aches. Your emotional experience can be either numbness or a high sense of different emotions all at once, where you feel sadness, maybe you feel anger, loss of pleasure in the things that you used to like to do, or you could even feel shocked and dismayed. Sometimes you may experience thoughts or beliefs, making it hard to concentrate, maybe intrusive thoughts that just can't seem to go away. And it can also include things like searching for a meaning in your loss and trying to make sense of it all. You can also be acting differently. Maybe people around you may see that you seem different, or you might notice, I'm not myself. I behave differently. I'm withdrawing from my friends and family, or anything that reminds me of my baby, I want to stay away from. And the hard thing could be that you don't know how to change those behaviors or those reactions when you're grieving.
So we are going to jump in, and before we start talking about self-care, we just wanted to bring up the concept of resilience. And so the definition of resilience is your ability to recover and grow when faced with adverse situations. And so researchers have shown that self-care is a way to usher in that resiliency. And so tonight we wanted to touch on that, especially during the Black Maternal Mental Health Week, how important self-care is. And while we are using these tips specifically for moms of loss, these things can be shared with all people because we know that self-care is just simply important. So we'll jump into some of these tips and then we'll go from there. So again, this is just about self-care tips and strategies that we can use as baby loss moms right after loss and even well beyond. For Kima and I, we are further along in our grief journey, but it's still important for us to pour into ourselves with self-care, just as it is for baby loss moms that are fresh or new to this experience of grieving this type of loss. So
I want to just also add baby loss dads as well, and any community members or family members that are also impacted.
Absolutely. So one of the first things these are just kind of some physical kind of tips that we can do right away. And we know that once you get home from the hospital after experiencing loss, it's almost like a whirlwind of things that have occurred. So trying to get some type of sleep is important because we know that our body functions and need sleep to be able to function. And things can get very crazy in our mind. So I know it's very hard to kind of shut your mind off, especially right after your loss, but trying to find moments in your day when you can gather some sleep is very important, as well as aiding that with a good nutrition. And I know this is another thing that seems very easy on paper, but you know, you may not feel up to eating. So just making sure that you're feeding your body, even though you have just experienced a hard, devastating loss. So just making sure that those things that are that seem obvious, that you're definitely pouring that into yourself. Another strategy that you can use for self-care is getting out in nature. Um, Going by water, hearing those sounds, or getting out in the sun, hiking or running, or just doing something where you're outside, where you can catch some fresh air. Oftentimes, I did a poll on one of my social medias, and a lot of moms said that getting outside really kind of fueled them in a way that just kind of sitting behind a desk or being inside watching TV or something did not. So just trying to find ways where you can get outside, or the next one is moving your body, some form of exercise. And it doesn't have to be anything that is very labor intensive. It could be just a simple walk around the block, especially if you were in loss and you had to have like a C-section, where your body is kind of physically it's different from before you went into the hospital. You want to find ways that you're able to just kind of get up and move and stretch your body a little bit. Another thing that we suggest is tapping in early to your support or your friend group, your community. And that can look very different for different people, depending on who's in your support circle, who you feel comfortable sharing information with. And I always suggest finding at least one person that you can go to vent, or if you need a shoulder to cry on, somewhere where your voice is heard, that you're listened to. And sometimes that may have to start with just you, and writing or journaling for yourself. And we'll kind of tackle journaling later in the presentation. But sometimes you may have to start with yourself as the person that you rely on, and then move that out once you feel comfortable speaking about your loss. So just keeping in mind people that you feel you can go to in these tough moments. Another one that I think we overlook is just pausing, hitting the pause button and really sitting still, because a lot of times, especially like right after loss, you're trying to reestablish your normalcy. And so it's like, well, if I just jump back into work, if I just jump back into all the things that I've been doing, if I jump back into, if you have other children, motherhood or being a spouse, everything will kind of just fall back into place. And that's typically not how this grieving process works, unfortunately. So a lot of times what we find is that we just have to stop, push the pause button, and really process what is happening. Because especially when you're looking at all the condolences that come your way and all the people that may be around at the very beginning, eventually that will stop, and you're going to have to come to a realization that, okay, I'm in this grief thing and I have to figure out how to maneuver through it. So really just pausing, taking inventory of where you are at this very moment is helpful. And then another strategy that we can use, which is very practical, is some form of breath work or a mindfulness exercise. So I'm going to invite Kima just to kind of show us an exercise of what breath work looks like.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alicia. So a simple exercise that you can do that doesn't take up a lot of time, but is still very powerful and effective for helping you center and come back to the present moment, is called circle breathing. And so I'll go ahead and explain what that looks like, and then what we'll do is practice together. So first, you want to inhale slowly to a count of 4, And then when you inhale, you want to make sure that you're filling your belly with air and not your chest. So you don't want to be shallow breathing. You want to be deep breathing through your diaphragm. And then as you are breathing, you want to, again, count to 4, and then hold your breath to a count of 4. And then exhale fully, letting all that air, like you're deflating that balloon, to a count of 4. And if you do this 4 times, at least 4 times, you will start to really center yourself, come back to a present moment, and really have a mindfulness effect. So as we go ahead and try to practice this together, I want you to either count to yourself or count out loud if you prefer. Of course, you want to mute your video if you are gonna, or your audio, excuse me, if you are gonna count out loud. And you can also turn your video off, or you can close your eyes if you like to keep your video on. But we just want you to be in a place that feels safe for you. So as we practice this together, I will go ahead and count out for us, and we will just go through the steps. So if you want to just get in a comfortable position, and the first thing we want to do is just inhale to a count of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's try that again. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. One more time. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you will see, this exercise can be definitely more slow. We can count slower and take your time, or you can count a little more steady like I did. But this is a simple exercise that you can do at any time. And the nice thing is no one needs to know that you're doing it. Back to you, Alicia.
Thanks, Kima. Can we go to the next slide, please? So another thing that we can do to add to our self-care toolbox is creating a priority list. And a lot of times, like I mentioned before, we have a lot on our plate. And once we experience loss, it may seem like it's getting very overwhelming. So something practical you can do is take out a piece of paper and have a pen and split your paper up into 3 sections. And these 3 sections will kind of help you see what is at the top of your priority list and some things that may not be as urgent to get to. So in that first column, I want you to write down things that absolutely need to get done. So these are the things that are practical around your house. If you need to eat, if you need to get rest, if you have a job that you're required to go to, if you don't have leave after your loss, getting to work, if you have other children, getting them off to school or to their different activities, things that just have to get done within your day. And then that middle column are things that need to get done but not as pressing. So this could mean your laundry or your grocery shopping or just things in your day that have to get done, but they don't have to be at the very top of your priority list, where you may be able to do it once a week or something like that. And then that last column is stuff that maybe you've been working on, passion projects, trips that you've planned. If those things are not as pressing and you don't feel that you have the capacity to do them, that is something that you can kind of put in that last column to get to when you feel up to it. And that leads to my next point of saying no to things that no longer serve you in the moment. And that is very important because a lot of times, again, we're very busy people. We take on a lot of roles, but self-care really talks about prioritizing yourself first in that, and not in a selfish way, but in a way saying that you have to fill your cup first before you can pour out and help others to sustain what they're doing. So you have to find ways to lessen the things that are on your plate that no longer serve you, at least in this moment when grief is present. Because it is very hard just to kind of do some of those things that may seem mundane to the outside world. But for somebody that is grieving, it can look and feel extremely difficult. So you don't want to add more to your plate that does not need to be there. So really looking at the things that you're doing throughout your day and thinking, is this serving me? If not, how can I offload this off my list altogether? Or maybe come back to it when I feel ready. And what does that process look like? Who do you need to inform if you do choose to say no to something? The next one is writing down affirmations and reciting them. So you can find affirmations a lot of places. A good resource is Pinterest. If you have some things that you want to, affirmations about grief, affirmations about who I am, affirmations as a mother, affirmations as a father, you can kind of search those things and find something that resonates with you. Or you can look up affirmations and then off of the ones you see, create your own that are tailor-made for you that feel good. And you want to recite these things. And a lot of times with affirmations, you may not be in that spot where you are current day, but the point is to say them so much that you begin to see what you say. And so affirmations are huge. You can do them when you wake up. You can post them, places in your house or at work or in your car where you'll see them, remind yourself. You can put reminders on your phone that pop up to remind you to speak positively to yourself, because in grief, a lot of times we can blame ourselves for our loss, and we can be very hard on ourselves and what we're going through, blaming ourselves, where I talked about the silent secrecy and shame. Shame and guilt can play a huge role in grief as a baby loss parent. And so we want to be pouring into ourselves verbally so that we can begin to see the person that we want to see reflected in that mirror. Another thing that we can do is decluttering our physical or our mental space. So for me, it was really hard to get things done if my space was cluttered. So to think clearly, to try to start picking the pieces back together, I needed a space that was, very serene, that I can begin to try to pull myself together. So just if you're in a space that feels a little cluttered, maybe getting rid of some things or putting some things away that may not be conducive to how you're feeling. And a big one is a mental decluttering, or we call it like a brain dump, where your mind is racing oftentimes, thinking about what you could have done differently or how you're feeling, what triggered you today, what you've experienced, things people have said. All of those things are kind of whirling around in your mind. You may replay the moment when you found out about your baby no longer having a heartbeat, or you may replay in your mind what it was like at the hospital experience or at their funeral or memorial service. So things like that, where it's just constantly in your mind. If you just give yourself a time limit, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and just write down what is in your mind without really thinking about it, just so you can get it on paper. And then once you see it on paper, if it's something that needs to be investigated further, you can do that through your journal writing. So again, just really making sure you're keeping a clear head, that you're able to get some clarity on some things as you grieve. Another is realigning with the spiritual force that you connect with. And not everybody is religious or has a spiritual connection, but for some, spirituality is very important in their journey of grieving and healing. And so finding ways that you can read devotionals or do prayers or meditations, those are another way to just kind of center yourself, look inward, work on yourself internally, so that you can show up into the world as the person that you'd like externally. Some more of the strategies that we want to share with you all are doing something that fuels your soul. And this is something that is stripped of your titles. This is something specifically that you enjoy. And it doesn't have to be for any work-related thing or something that is a requirement for you or responsibility for your family. So if you're somebody that likes to sew, where you could just spend a few minutes a day or, carve out some time in your week or month that you can just do that for you. Because I think a lot of people, when we think about self-care, we think about going to the spa or, getting a manicure or pedicure or something where it's just very surface. But there are other things that you can do, and it could be something that is very, minuscule. If you like to go out and feed the squirrels, do that, just something that can get your mind off of grief, because we know that grief is very encompassing, like Kima mentioned in the quote at the very beginning. I have let the light in, and that could be physically. So actually opening the blinds and letting the sun come in your space and really just inviting light in, but also being around people that feel like light to you. It's important that you really protect your space as you're grieving, because we already know grief is tough. And so you don't want to invite people into your space that make you feel worse or are bringing the mood down even further, adding their 2 cents on what you should be doing, what you're not doing. So you really want to be surrounded by people that feel like light. And I mentioned this before, but journaling or video recording how you feel. And this is a really big one, twofold. It really, again, just helps you dump all those emotions that you feel. And I really love journaling because it allows you to be as raw and honest as you want to be without feeling judged, because you're the only one that reads this paper, or you're the only one that can see the video that you record of yourself. So really tapping into how are you feeling outside of what everybody thinks you should feel or thinks that how your grief should look. This is a way to keep yourself honest on, this is what I'm really experiencing, this is what I'm feeling. And you can use those journals to either figure out where you want to go down the road, and we'll talk about therapy in a bit, but it can show you in those areas where you feel like you may need a little bit more help, but it can also show you how you've grown over your time of grief. So that is a huge one that I would absolutely recommend. And then outsourcing tasks to others or hiring outside help. And I know, again, we talk about all the different hats and roles that we play within a day, but there are a lot of things that we can offload to others, at least temporarily, until we feel up to doing those tasks. And so for newly grieving parents, something that I would suggest is, if you see things that are around you that may need to get done, creating some sort of list, because there's always people that ask, well, what, I'm here for you if you need me, or is there something I can do for you? And in the moment, you may not remember, just because of grief and, being enthralled in that. But if you see something around your house, or if you think about something, jot those things down. And so when people come to you with those requests, is there something that I can do for you? You can go straight to your list, and maybe it's, I need you to pick up groceries for me, or I need you to drop my kids off at a soccer game today. I need you to come by and pick up my laundry, or if you can wash my dishes after dinner for us, or, just small little tasks that may help offload things from you. And if you don't have people in your circle like that, and you have the financial means, maybe even hiring somebody to come clean the house for you, so that's one thing you don't have to do, or grabbing a gift card for Postmates or somewhere that they can deliver so you don't have to think about cooking. So just really practical things to think about in this grief journey. And lastly, we want you to think about hiring a life coach or a therapist to help you sort out your feelings. So we know that it's important to be honest with yourself, to also build community around you that is helpful, but actually having somebody who's licensed in helping you sort out your feelings of grief and all those feelings and emotions that you're working with on a daily basis can be very helpful in your process towards healing. So Kima is going to go into the second half of the presentation and tell us how to look for a therapist and some things to look out for. I'm sorry, before we get to that, these are just a few extra reminders to wrap up our self-care piece. So remembering that it's okay to opt out and having an exit strategy. So an exit strategy just means if I'm invited to a baby shower and I know that I want to be there, but I get there and it gets a little too overwhelming for me, that I have an exit strategy. So I'm like, I can tell the host, maybe I'll be here for 30 minutes and see how that goes. And if it works, then great, I'll stay. If not, I may need to exit, but I left my gift on the table. Just making sure you give yourself a space for an out. And then again, just saying it's okay to say no. You don't have to do things that you don't feel comfortable. If you don't feel emotionally ready to go to a baby shower, be around children, see people with pregnant bellies, there are ways to opt out of that. It's okay to change your mind. So you may say, hey, I'm ready to go on vacation. And then when you get close to it, it's like, nope, I can't do it. I just don't feel physically up to it. It's okay to say no, or even changing your mind about something that you thought prior to your grief that may have changed within you grieving. That's okay as well. It's okay to talk about your baby and honor your baby in a way that feels authentic to you. So for a lot of us that are working with RTZ Hope, we choose to share our stories because it is helpful, it is healing for us. But not everybody is there yet where they want to share it on social media, where they want to talk about their baby, and that's okay. Find where you are in your journey and honor that space. You don't have to compare yourself and how you're grieving to others. And then it's okay to not be perfect at self-care because you're human, but we just ask you that you do invest some of your time into pouring into yourself. So that may look like 5 minutes in the morning before everybody wakes up in your house, or that could look like a day of self-care, but do what feels good to you, natural to you, and then just keep practicing it. You'll get better over time. And then it's also okay to ask for the type of support that you need. And that can come in a lot of ways. And again, Kima will touch on that. It's okay to reject the unhelpful suggestions or messaging that you get from friends and family. So we know a lot of people want to help, want to feel like they're supporting you in your grief, but they can say things that can be insensitive or even hurtful. And it's okay to reject those sentiments that they may talk to you about, or even advice that they may offer you that just does not feel helpful. You don't have to subscribe to that, and being okay with voicing that if that feels comfortable to you. If you don't feel comfortable speaking it, writing it out, or emailing them about how you feel, because you don't want to get stuck with that internal war when you can voice that out to others in your circle. It's okay to pause contact or even change support systems, friendships that no longer serve you. So it's okay to say, this person just is not helping me in this season. And you can say, I may need to take a step back and distance yourself from people that just don't feel like, again, I talked about letting the light in, being around people that are helpful in your grief season. It's already hard enough alone just to grieve your baby and the loss and all the secondary losses that come along with that. So again, you want to create a environment that is conducive to you growing. And if somebody is hindering that, whether it's family or friends, that you are allowed to change that relationship. Maybe their access to you gets cut off, or it may dwindle, depending on how you feel about the person. And you don't have to have the right answer overnight. These things come over time. And then lastly, it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to walk around putting on a fake face just because that's what society says that we need to do. You don't have to move on quickly because somebody said there's a time limit to grief. You get to decide what grieving looks like for you. And if you don't feel okay, it's okay. And there are resources that you can utilize to help you get back to a place where you feel comfortable in your grieving journey. And the last thing I wanted to share, RTZ Hope has created this self-care calendar, and we created this for the month of July because it's BIPOC Mental Health Month, but we wanted to make sure that we gave you all suggestions on things that you can do, practical things you can do on a daily basis. And this is from July, but you can use this whenever, some of these suggestions. So the first box says, write down 3 things you are grateful for in a journal. So just very simple and practical things you can do to start self-care if self-care is something that is foreign to you. So hopefully this helps. And I hope that you can find at least one thing off this list that you can implement maybe even today or this weekend. And before Kima started, I wanted to, if you wanted to check the chat just to make sure. I saw somebody said, do you have any recommended language of how to do that if someone is not conducive to your grief process? My mother is that person and I am struggling on what to say. So I can let you answer, Kima, and then I can jump in if like.
So yeah, like Alicia mentioned before, there's some people in your circle, even someone very close like your mother, who may not understand what you need for self-care. That's a tough one, because I think we often think we don't want to hurt other people's feelings, but I think it's something as simple as, here's what's helpful to me. This is what I need from you. And that can be, I need you to, basically step back. I need you to maybe not mention certain things because they are triggering to me. I think when you speak from your own experience rather than concerning yourself with how someone's going to take the message, I think you come from more of an authentic place. So this is how I feel when you say these things. This is how it makes me, how it hurts me. This is how I react, or this is how I feel. And I want you to help me in this way. This is what I need from you as my mom, or as my partner. And, that should be pretty simple for someone. If they can't understand that and they continue to not be helpful or supportive or do things that they know is triggering, then that's a decision to make about how much time do you want to spend around that person. Maybe you might limit how much time you spend with them. And when you spend that time with them, maybe you only focus on certain topics. And that debate, your grief and your loss topic is not a topic that person could be really helpful to you and talking with you about. So that doesn't get discussed. But maybe other things, maybe more superficial things, are things that you can really still bond with that person with. And just knowing who your village is, like who can you go to that can really respond to you in a way that's helpful. Do we have any other questions? Anything else about self-care strategies or things like that? Okay, well, I will go ahead and talk a little bit more about how to find a therapist. So I am a licensed clinical social worker by trade, and I do practice psychotherapy. So In this part of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit more about finding a therapist and what all goes into that. I think a lot of times we don't think about the steps in the process of finding the right fit. So if you or someone you know is seeking therapy to deal with grief and loss or the challenges that come with that, this part of the webinar is for you. I also want to note that therapy is one of many tools and many strategies in your self-care toolbox, as Alicia nicely put in her presentation. There's so many strategies that will be helpful, and in therapy, it's just one of those strategies. It is a very effective strategy, I want to point out, and it's been, it can be really helpful for you in dealing with grief and loss, especially when it's the right fit. So we'll talk about that. So the first thing that you can do when you're thinking about, I think I want to see a therapist, is really asking a trusted friend. And I think we tend to, I think we tend to downplay how much word of mouth is really still a valuable and effective method of referral. So if you have a friend, a family member, a coworker, or someone in your support group, maybe you attend a support group and you know someone who's in therapy, see if you can ask them about their experience with that therapist, if it's someone that they would recommend to you, and see what that experience has been like. And that could be a helpful way to get started with someone in therapy. So doing your own research again. So you might ask a friend, and then maybe you get a couple names or you get a name. And so you still want to do your own research and explore about, therapists either in your location or someone that you know of. Just kind of dig a little bit and find out. Therapists work in many different settings, and they can be found in doctors' offices, maybe even in churches or amongst a congregation. If there's a pastor who does spiritual counseling, they may have a therapist that works on non-spiritual counseling. University settings usually has therapists who are working towards licensure. So they may not be fully licensed, but they are practicing therapy. Private practice settings, we know there's many therapists that have their own business or they have a group practice with a small number of other therapists that work together. And then also agency settings. So community centers may have therapists as well, or state organizations as well. So as you do your research, you will see these things. So once you've kind of settled into figuring out, I think I want to try this out, conduct a search. So we live in a day and age where the information is right at our fingertips, right? You just go on the web and we can find out anything we really want at this point. Social media outlets and websites can provide a wealth of information, and they can also help you locate information or locate a therapist that you're looking for, or someone you might be interested in, you want to know more about their background. So start just by checking the internet. And then once you've sort of looked on the internet, you can refine your search. So when you refine your search, you want to have an idea of what you're looking for. So, are you looking for a therapist of a certain race or ethnicity? Are you looking for a therapist of a certain gender? Do you want your therapist to speak a certain language? Are you interested in individual therapy? Do you want to go as a couple and do couples counseling? Or is this more of a family therapy approach you want to explore? So there's so many things to be thinking about. Who would be the right fit for me, and what is it that I want in therapy? I also recommend, making a list of at least 3 therapists that you have in mind once you are looking through your search, and then reviewing their websites is a good way to start to refine your search. So the next recommendation is to get a referral from your doctor. So if you have a primary care provider or you have an OBGYN that you see, ask them for a therapy recommendation or referral. A lot of times doctors have their own listings of in-network providers who, usually have or would take the insurance that you have if you have insurance from your job. So start there and just simply ask them, hey, I'm interested in seeing a therapist. Can you recommend someone? Another really good secret, though, I think some people don't know, but I found out after I lost my son Jackson, I had to do this and look for insurance or ask my insurance company about my coverage because I didn't know. And I'm a therapist and I didn't even know what my coverage was. So I asked my insurance company and they really helped explain to me what my coverage and benefits were. And so you can call and you can just say, I'm looking at therapy in network. What would that look like? You can ask about copays and also limitations on any number of sessions. So maybe they cover a certain amount of sessions, or maybe they cover they cover the consultation in the first session, but then everything else is on you. You just have to ask the question and look and see if you don't know what your coverage looks like. So therapist directories are a really great tool. There's a lot of search engines now that way you can find providers who have either the same interests or similar interests. A really popular one is Psychology Today. But we also want to tell you about the RTZ Hope provider directory. So we know that finding a therapist is very challenging. It's not an easy thing. And also if you live in a rural area, it can be even more challenging to try to narrow down someone that is going to be the right fit for you. The RTZ website has a directory tool. And the really neat thing about the directory is that it's for providers. It has a list of providers who work specifically with pregnancy and infant loss communities. So I think that can be really valuable, especially if, it's important to you that your therapist understands pregnancy and infant loss. So check out the RTZ provider directory if you get a chance. And then just expanding your search is also important too. So we know the COVID pandemic has led to a rise in telehealth services, and that has opened up a lot of possibilities for therapists to serve clients from different geographical locations, which is an awesome thing. It may be also important for you to have sessions in person, or you might prefer to be in the comfort of your own home. So these are things to be asking yourself, how do I want therapy to look? Does it matter to me if the person is, in a different state? And remember, all these options are available to you now more than ever. Okay, so questions to ask yourself. Again, because therapy is it's an interpersonal relationship experience. So it's going to be, you're driving the train in terms of what that looks like and what you need. So I would recommend that you ask yourself some questions. You would ask yourself, is therapy even right for me? Again, looking at all the other self-care tips that we talked about, therapy is one tool. You want to ask yourself, is this right for me? Is this something that I want to get into? What do I want to get out of therapy? When I do submit to this, what is that I'm looking for? What time commitment can I reasonably make to my own self-care right now? And I think that is a very important question, because self-care takes time. Just like Alicia mentioned earlier, it can start with just 5 minutes or it can be a full day. Therapy sessions typically run for 50 minutes for one session, and they can run, more. They can run up to, an hour and a half or 2 hours, depending on the type of session that you're going in for. So think about everything that you have going on, and then what commitment can you make? But I think it's a very important commitment to make to yourself. Will I need financial support for sessions? Again, many therapists have their own private practice, so they have, they set their amount of what their sessions will cost. You may have to pay a copay depending on if you're going through insurance. If you're going to be self-pay, then it would be coming out of your pocket. So you could ask if the therapist has a sliding scale program that they have created. So they would look at your income level and then decide on a cost there. And also insurance might cover some sessions, but maybe not all the sessions that you would like to get into. Then you want to also ask yourself, what are my goals, right? So what are some of maybe, and I would recommend maybe just looking at two to three goals, not many goals, but 2 to 3 goals that I want to really explore and accomplish in therapy. And that's one of the questions that when you do start therapy, your therapist will ask you, what is it that you want to get out of this? What are some goals that I can help you with? And the last question is, how will I know when I'm done? So how will you know when you actually accomplished your goal, right? And I would also recommend to stay away from the goal to not experience grief, because we know grief stays with us. It won't ever leave. It's a part of us, right? So we don't want to be working on a goal to never be sad again, but we want to work on a goal of like, how do I integrate my loss into my life now? How would my life look now that, my child is no longer with me, in the physical sense, but with me in my heart? Or whatever other goals that you want to work on, but just knowing, when will I know when I'm done? So it may seem strange to think about interviewing a potential therapist, but I do highly recommend that you do this, because therapy is so individualized. And it's a process built on trust, and it's an interpersonal relationship that you're shaping with this other person who's also being neutral. So you want to kind of talk with them about their beliefs, find out what is their licensure and their expertise, how long have they practiced, right? What experience do they have working with people with similar issues as me? I think that's a huge question that you can ask, a very important one. Because in my own personal experience, after I lost my son, I did start therapy with someone. And although the person was great, the fit wasn't it wasn't the best fit for me, because I needed someone that understood pregnancy and infant loss and not general loss. There's a difference. And so if that's important to you, the best way to find that out is to actually ask them those questions. You also want to ask, what is your approach or style? So some therapists might expect that you will have homework in between your sessions and things that you're working on. Some might want you to work actively in the session and not have anything in terms of homework pieces that you would be doing outside of sessions. So interviewing is really the best way to find out whether this person is going to be the right fit for me. So some other important questions you can ask a potential provider. Can I bring a support person with me? This often gets overlooked because therapy is a very individualized process. However, bringing in a support person, either your partner or a family member, an advocate, someone that you feel safe with in the beginning, you want to just make sure if that therapist, supports that idea and can support you in that way. Do you take my insurance or have a sliding scale? That goes back to that financial part of it. And what out-of-pocket expenses should I expect? So if there are things like books or other things that the therapist might recommend as you're working with them on your goals, you want to be aware of that. Do you have an understanding of my perspective as a Latina, as an LGBT family? Whatever that blank is, you want to ask, do they have an understanding of your own perspective if it's different from that therapist? And what sessions will be like? So that helps really having an idea in your mind of what your time with that person will look like. And virtual will definitely look different than in-person sessions. So really kind of talking about that so you have an expectation. And one thing I just want to point out from this slide is really remember that all therapists are not equal and all therapy is not the same. So here we just talk about some alternative therapeutic resources. So these are things that are not therapy, but they are definitely great additions to therapy. So support groups are definitely an awesome, well-proven source of support, because they can definitely decrease feelings of isolation and shame. So they can be a source of therapeutic support for a grieving family or a grieving parent. Retreats are also really awesome opportunities to build community and create connection. They're usually one-time events that can span over a couple of weeks, can span over a couple of days. And RTZ has retreats that they do for grieving parents. And if Kylie would like to say more about those retreats, during this presentation, then you can learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Kima. First of all, I just want to say I love that you talked about how to interview a therapist, because I was going to ask you that. Like, what do you ask?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, I would just say, like, to go along with that, yeah, you have to find the right therapist for you. So someone can, right? Like someone can be a great therapist, but they might not be a good fit for you. And so it's okay to interview different people. And if someone doesn't feel like they're working, to find another person. It's okay to do that. Okay, so I'm going to talk just briefly about the retreats. So right now the retreats are on hold because of COVID, but we hope to have them back up and running in like maybe 2 a year in 2022. And so we created an experience for bereaved mothers to come from a Thursday to a Sunday, so a long weekend, where they are in a space that is like filled with other people who have been through a similar experience. So we're building community. We're also like taking time out of your normal life, right? Getting out of your setting, getting into nature, and devoting this time to your grieving and your healing. And I think that that's an important thing, whether that be retreats, therapy, or support groups, that you are setting time aside to focus on your grief. And then with retreats, like, it's a very holistic experience, right? Because grief, as Kima and Alishia both mentioned, like it is a whole person experience, and that we do talking and education around, certain topics to help kind of build your toolbox of how do you navigate life after loss. But then also the community piece is so important. And then there's a lot of kind of suggestions, ideas on how do you connect with your baby, right? Like in our normal society and culture, there's this idea that we're supposed to move on, get over our loss, and that's not the truth, right? Like, right, you love your baby and you will grieve them forever. There's always going to be a piece of your heart missing. And so with that, like, working on the connection between you and your baby, and like, what does that look like? So, but I will say, like, the most powerful thing is like being with a small group of people in a very safe space for an extended period of time. It is very transformational. So fingers crossed that, we will be able to do this in 2022.
I can't wait to see it. Thank you, Kylie. Yeah, so we also know that self-help, so in the form of books, podcasts, journals, information about pregnancy and infant loss can be really helpful and really good resources as well. But we also want to be aware that if you are experiencing thoughts of suicide or self-harm, or someone is having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, we really want to make sure that that person gets to immediate professional help. And so the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is listed below. And it's a number where you call. There's crisis trained professionals on the other end that can help you get to the right support if you are having those experiences. So here we just want to talk about some extra resources available through RTZ Hope and through other resources. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the RTZ Hope directories and support groups for parents, as well as education and resources. Kylie, if you can share a little bit more about support groups that are happening in RTZ, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so our groups, like from the spring and summer, have come to a close, but we will be starting a lot of new groups up in September. And the way that we do our groups at Return to Zero is they're a 6-week session. So you commit for the 6 weeks, and we go through a curriculum, and it's with the same group of people. So it's the same group of people every time, so you get to know them. So we're really building community as well as learning to navigate your grief journey. We also offer usually a part 2. So there's like part 1 is 6 weeks and a part 2 is 4 weeks. And just like Kima and Alishia wrote down a few of the options for support groups, but we have pregnancy and infant loss, we have recurrent loss and infertility, we have women of color, we're doing an LGBTQ group, we're going to be doing a fathers group, we have a ending a wanted pregnancy group, pregnancy after loss. I'm probably forgetting 1 or 2, but a lot of specific groups for different special situations. So, and it's good. And it's about, I would say between 6 and 10 people join the group. So it's a small group, and it's a very safe container.
Yeah, thank you, Kylie. So Alishia and I, as Kylie mentioned, in the fall, we will be hosting our BIPOC women's support group, and it starts September 12th and runs for 6 weeks. And we facilitate on Sundays. We call it our SelfCare Sundays, actually. And so, like we mentioned earlier in this presentation, we also moderate the BIPOC Growth and Healing After Pregnancy and Infant Loss Facebook group. So if you would like to connect with us, please you will find us there, or also look into the support groups as well. And this is just a list of BIPOC directories. So as we mentioned about directories, there's a lot of different directories popping up. And in the spirit of BIPOC Mental Health Month, I think it's appropriate that we have this list here of all different groups represented, where you can find a therapist who can be specific to the needs that you are looking for, or the things that would be helpful to you. And so lastly, I just want to leave us with this quote as we wind down today from this presentation. This quote is from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and John Kessler, and they're 2 pioneers in the field of grief and loss. And they say, the reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal, and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same, nor should you be the same, nor would you want to. So I just want to thank you all for being here today, and just leave you with, you are not alone, you are not at fault, and with help, you can heal.
Thank you both so much. Very, very important words of wisdom, like throughout the whole presentation. So thank you. And I just want to open this up to questions for Kima and Alishia. If you want to type them in the chat box, we can answer them. And yeah, I'll include this in the email that I sent out with the recording, but on our pregnancy and infant loss directory, we do have a therapist, psychiatrist section, but we also have a support group, support organization section that's by location. So I can share that. I mean, I can share the link here, but I can also share it when I send out. Sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time, but I can, yeah, when I send out the link, I'll share it. So I can't talk.
I was just going to say too, as you were typing, just as Kima and I have been facilitators for the BIPOC group over the last year or a few months, and it's just been very inspirational as a facilitator, just to see all the women that have you know, they're working through grief, and you can start to see the transformation in them individually and as a group. So it's just very rewarding to see them on that journey. So if you are interested in finding a support, and maybe the group support is a way that you think you want to lean, definitely check out the RTZ Hope website, because they have some amazing support groups.
So I'm just wondering if there's anyone have any questions. Valerie says thank you to both of you. This was a great presentation. I agree.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I guess the one thing that I would like to add while I'm waiting, if anyone wants to ask questions, is that if you're watching this, whether it be live or through a recording, we're able to offer these webinars free of charge for people, all of our webinars. And we have a library of webinars, both for providers and for parents on our website. But we can't do it without the financial support of our community so that we can be sustainable. So if you found this to be helpful, if you could make a donation, and every dollar counts, you know, so any amount, that would be appreciated, and we're grateful for that. Okay, so I don't think there's any other questions. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I hope that you found this information to be helpful for you to weave into your lives as you are trying to navigate life after loss.